Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Edmund Ironside, and today we're going to finish up Act 2, Scene 3 of this one. This one is going slower than some of the others because there's a lot of monologues in here, and even there's a lot that's happened in this Act 2, Scene 3. Canutus is livid that Turkillus and Leofric have deserted him, so he brought out their sons and had Stitch cut off the hands and noses of the sons, who then curse him, and they're like, never let England be ruled by a foreign king, because Canutus is actually Danish. And then a messenger, the sons are taken off stage anyway, and then a messenger comes in and lets Canutus know that 20,000, it gives him letters that let him know that 20,000 of his soldiers who he had sent north to fight Edmund Ironside have all been defeated. So Canutus, in yesterday's monologue, at the beginning of it, was putting on this face of, I'm so angry about this, and this is a terrible loss, and we're going to go get him next time, sort of thing. And then he tells everybody to leave the room, except for Edricus. So it's just the two of them on stage. And in the second half of yesterday's monologue, he was like, what do? I don't want to be the one that's remembered for having lost all of the territory that my father gained. How do I navigate this situation so that my name doesn't go down in history synonymous with shameful things? And I think it's kind of interesting that we get to see that side of him. And I think that it's also interesting that he shares that side of himself with Edricus, knowing what we know about Edricus, that he's really conniving and believes in doing all of the nasty, underhanded things that will get him to where he wants to be. But he has gotten himself into this position of trust with Canutus. So at the end of Canutus's speech yesterday, he's like, how do I do this so that my name is not a shameful one in the history books? And Edricus responds by saying, despair not, noble king. Time comes in time. Know ye not 'tis a deed of policy and fickle chance to cross your mightiness? For else in time you might dismount the queen and throw her headlong from her rolling stone and take her whirling wheel into your hand. I tell your grace, chance ever envies wise men and favors fools, promoting them aloft. But as for this flea spot of dishonor, the greatest monarchs have endured more. Even blinking Philip's son, and many more whose repetition were needless to recite. So what he's just trying to talk Canutus down here, is what he's saying. He's like, just relax. Don't you know that it's fortune's job to mess with you? Like, fate has to mess with you a little bit, because otherwise you might take over the wheel of fate. It took me a couple readings and then some context from later in the scene to figure out what he was talking about with dismounting the queen and taking her whirling wheel into his hand. I was like, is that some sort of sexual reference? And it could be, but it could also be a reference to Lady Fortune, that he would knock her out of her place, and he would be the one in charge of fortune and people's fates and all of those sorts of things, because he is that strong and mighty and powerful. So chance and fortune and fate have to mess with him so that he doesn't become, too omnipotent kind of thing. And then he's like, and this little tiny blot that's Edmund Ironside is nothing. The greatest kings have had to deal with far worse. So this is nothing. You don't even, it's not even worth mentioning this. Don't even worry about it. And Canutus responds to this with like, ooh, you're flattering me. What else? Well, what good things do we see coming? He's like, do you see how the sun has gotten kind of pale and the moon is kind of red, and how come we can't see some stars right now? Are these signs of things? And Edricus is like, they might be signs of things, and they're most likely signs that Edmund is going to fail. And Canutus is like, okay, that's, yeah, all right, time to regroup, let's get together. Wow, it's gotten dark outside, go get a torch. So Edricus leaves the stage for a second to get a torch, and comes back in with one, and he's like, wow, the fog is so thick, it almost dampened out the torch. And Canutus is like, you know what? you're a flatterer, and nobody likes a flatterer, and nobody likes somebody that, you know, is blowing smoke up their butt, and you know, people can see directly through your lies and all these sorts of things. He's like, I shouldn't trust you, I shouldn't listen to you. You're a flatterer. And Edricus, in true Edricus form, responds by saying, you know, I didn't say anything that wasn't true, Your Highness, Your Mightiness, because you are that great. And Canute is like, okay, fine, and then makes a sort of racial slur, and then the scene is over. So I personally am not on the side of Canutus and or Edricus. I think that they're both really distasteful characters. I think that they're written really well to be as distasteful as they are and come off that way. But I do think that this scene is interesting because of the arc of power and control that we get to see Canutus go through. You know, we actually see him sort of at a low point, but then gaining the power back of torturing the boys, and then plummeting down to his army is gone, and then coming back up through the flattery, but then calling out the flattery and saying, you know, be honest with me. I'd rather that you be honest with me. But then again, falling for it when Edricus is like, you know, I'm not saying anything that's not true. So I just think that it's interesting that we get to see a little bit more of Canutus, and he becomes a little bit more rounded in this scene than he has been in previous ones. But anyway, we'll see where his character continues to go as we continue on with this play. I'll see you tomorrow for more. Mwah.